I have a general idea of what I want to visualize, but I never want to really know how the image is going to look like. There always needs to be the unknown, unexpected, adventurous element. Most of my photographs are constructed because I like to create situations that you don't easily find in reality. So I like to bring unexpected elements together, elements which are normally in contrast with each other, and try to find a new balance between this, things you don't find while walking down the street. I come to my ideas just by observation. I observe my thoughts, I observe the life I'm living and the time that I'm living. I make a lot of notes, I make a lot of drawings, I collect text, I collect images, and all these are all the time rotating around me in my world, and out of this comes a desire to create a situation which cannot be found by just documentation, which needs to be created. I'm constantly deeply involved in my work, in archiving, in thinking, in imagining. I think the most important aspect of the process is the mental aspect. So it means like the idea, the philosophical aspect that you have of what you want to represent, so your idea. What is your message? Then you actually construct the situation, and this means like gathering all the elements that are necessary to construct a certain image. All of them have their different qualities. The first one is very intimate. You explore yourself and your relationship to your environment and your ideas that you have about the world that you want to represent. And in the second chapter, you actually go and work on how you want to visualize what you want to say. And once they're all on the set, there's always 50% improvisation, like the unknown, which will give the extra value and depth of that what is meant to be told. I approach photography as a performance. The idea, the persons, the situation, the activity through the body language, the feelings, and all these elements gather together in improvisation, and that's what creates the photograph. Construction, as in creating an image, is an important aspect in my work, but I also document daily personal events, like I did in the Crying series. Here I photograph myself over a period of years in moments I was feeling sad. The construction of all of them together becomes a story on themselves, because one picture of somebody crying tells a whole different story than 100 pictures of somebody crying. The idea of furniture bondage came to me because I realized I was always carrying my things around, and I felt that I belong more to my things than they belong to me, and the responsibility that came with that was probably bigger than the time that it cost me to maintain all the objects that I owned. And I was thinking about the relationships between your identity and how you identify yourself with the stuff that you own and what image you want to want people to have of you by the things that you carry around that are in your house, and what is the importance of these things. So I decided to photograph females which would literally carry the weight of their objects on their shoulders. They were sort of being almost suffocated by the things that you own. And that's really what I'm trying to portray, or at least try to erase this question by making these photographs. So I photographed the females neutral, naked, without any cultural identity, without any personality, as an archetype of a female body. Ga je nog maar een beetje door? Ja, mooi. Dit ziet er ook heel mooi uit. Cool. And it always has to be fast, and it's always a lot of stress and adrenaline, because I want enough time to find the image, but it's always on the balance, like, is she going to hold it, is she not going to hold it, is she going to shout out or cry, or I always try to push people beyond their borders.
Oh, die is ook goed, deze. Ja. Oh, deze ook, ja. Beide. Oké.
The domestic and the paradoxes of daily life are important starting points for me. One foot is always in the here and now, and the other in infinity, in the endless possibilities you have by creating new situations, new definitions, by combining elements that normally don't collide. En dan een heel klein beetje langzaam draaien richting de muur. Stapje voor stapje, millimeter voor millimeter. The processes of working vary. Sometimes it's very well planned and organized, like you have your concept, you know what you want to say. Sometimes it's just vague and it's a fascination, and it's something you have to first be encountered with in a situation to actually know what it's gonna be about. Or I go to people's houses who I want to photograph, and I have talks to them about their lives. They tell me intimate stories, we get to know each other, we have a cup of coffee, and I spend hours with them. And out of these conversations often comes inspiration that helps me to construct an image. Like, for example, the image of the woman wrapped in a present. This was because she was feeling really lonely. So my anticipation on her story was to give her a present in a human form. Or another example is that I went to a lady's house whose husband died, and her deepest desire was to be reunited with her and to transform this process of grief into a positive element. I tied her to balloons in order to levitate her to heaven, and all these situations often have a very healing and uplifting experience for the participant and also for myself. I like to speak about sad or heavy subjects in a humorous way. For me, this is an excellent method to create space around these topics. I don't want to create a new world. I don't want to be dogmatic. I'm trying to raise questions and show an alternative way of seeing the world. Photographic elements are not important in my work, as in the classic composition, lighting, the moment. How I use photography is to registrate a situation, event, a line of thought, and how I registrate it often is in the most neutral way. It's like I have a scenery and I just press the button and it's on the film. I like to use the medium photography because it's a very simple medium to speak about a certain subject. I like this intimacy of and this independency of the medium photography. I'm really fascinated by anti-aesthetics, or how we define beauty. I'm more interested in like the anti-hero than the hero, or I'm more interested what is invisible or disposed than in what is defined as amazing and beautiful and attractive. Every exposure of my photographs is different from the other. And I use archive images, I use photographs especially made for the presentation around a certain theme. I combine it with sculptural elements, with objects. Most of the time I present my photographs in temporary installations. They happen for a certain moment of time and then vanish again. And I like this aspect because to me it's also an aspect that belongs really to the medium photography. You have a moment, there was a situation, it got documented and it vanishes again. I like to represent photographs in that same way. I think it's always important to follow the first impulse and not to be restricted by conventions about how a work has to be made or come to existence. And that sometimes means that you just have the idea that you're being stupid, and it also means that things go wrong. It's like a small sacrifice that you make, like it's sort of vulnerable and embarrassing, and you don't know exactly what you're gonna expect, and you create chaos, you put things upside down, and you also are being confronted with your own madness in this way. The failure is just as much part of the process as the success, and the stupidity is just as much a crown on the whole process as the final conclusion. One of the series that I think is interesting in the magazine Construct for me is the series of Thomas Dammam, because they're so opposite from my photographs. In his work he portrays rooms in which important political events have happened. So he portrayed the kitchen in which Saddam Hussein was caught, or he portrays the embassy of Niger where documents are found that prove that Iraq had uranium. He goes to these locations, photographs them and reconstructs them again in his studio in Berlin. So what he does is he reconstructs the place out of paper. We see a lot of paperwork, but there's never anything written on top of the paper. And there's a huge absence of people. It's like somebody just run out of the photograph in huge emergency and left the scene behind it as we find it right now in the photograph. The pictures look like it's the natural environment in which something just has happened, but everything that is placed in the room is exactly composed and positioned in that particular way. What I think is the biggest difference between his work and mine is his control in creating an image, the sterileness and the absence of people. While I like to work with people, I like to create chaos, I like to be not in control of the situation. This is very important for me, but I still appreciate his way of working and I think it's interesting, but I could never do something like this. To me, spontaneity is very important, and that seems to be very important to be absent for him.